This was a huge week, but mostly with bad news. I don't think we ever had this many AAA game cancellations in 1 week. It's kinda crazy. Luckily, there's some good news as well about some potential big hitters still launching in 2024. I'll tell you everything you need to know. So let's go. Let's start with PlayStation, because they laid off 900 staff worldwide, which around 8% of the entire workforce. I want to get to why, but let's first look at the damage. Big studios like Insomniac Games, Naughty Dog, Guerrilla, but also Firesprite, recently responsible for the Horizon VR game, were hit with the reductions. But it gets even worse. They also shut down London studios, who you might know from the Blood and Truth VR game. They also did the PSVR 1 launch title, VR Worlds, and they were now working on a fantasy co-op combat live service game set in a modern day London. And I always thought this looked interesting, but they don't really have live service experience, so getting a game like this off the ground would have been very hard. But yeah, I would have loved to see them try, and now we will never know if they could have been able to pull it off. Also, the Twisted Metal game that was in the works at Firesprite has been cancelled, and this is what Herman Hulst, the boss at PlayStation Studios, had to say. Sometimes great ideas don't become great games. Sometimes a project is started with the best intentions before shifts within the market or industry result in a change of plan. I mean, Sony was already late to the party with their live service games. You could argue that they maybe should not have started some of these projects in the first place. And what's pretty crazy is that this brings the number of cancelled live service games from Sony to 4, because we also had The Last of Us Online earlier, of course. And maybe you remember Deviation Games, ex-Call of Duty developers, started the studio and also were like partnering with Sony. That did not work out though, so that team laid off 90 people in May last year. So we got 4 cancelled, 1 released, Helldivers 2, that is of course doing very well, so that's at least good news from this initiative. And still coming are Concord, the PvP game that should still launch this year, Marathon, the extraction shooter from Bungie, Fair Games from ex-Ubisoft developers, and Lost, but I think the most important one is the Horizon Online title. We knew they had 12 of these games planned, so that still leaves 3 unknown. But yeah, it's overall not a great look for a strategy they put so much money into. And yes, I mentioned Guerrilla Games as being part of the layoffs. 10%, so around 40 people lost their jobs. I'm wishing everyone, of course, the best that got impacted with any of these layoffs, but it's especially hard to see it at one of your favorite developers. Not surprising, but it was still confirmed that the Horizon Online project has not been cancelled, and I really think a lot is riding on this co-op Monster Hunter style game. Because the Horizon franchise is kind of in a weird position. Forbidden West just did not really grow the franchise as much as Sony probably hoped. Zero Dawn last year around this time set around the 24.3 million units, while Forbidden West was 8.4. 1 year after launch. But it still probably did not cross the 10 million yet, although the upcoming PC port on March 21st will certainly help with that. But yeah, it will probably not come close to the Zero Dawn numbers. So a third single player game will probably do well, but not reach a lot of new people, while being able to hunt robot dinos with friends could totally make things appealing for a lot of newcomers. Still, we know Sony is not releasing a new major first party AAA game until April 2025 at the earliest, probably even later than that. So this game is like summer 2025 at the earliest, and that's probably after Monster Hunter Wilds, which will make things only harder for Guerrilla Games. I still have faith though, like I'm sure they will have a really good game. I just really hope it's the success that they need and that the franchise deserves. But yeah, the big issue is that while PlayStation is successful, it's not making a lot of profit. They only had a 6% operating margin, so profit in the last quarter of 2023, while it was 9% in 2022 and 12 to 13% in the years before. So they made 50% less profit, which is kinda wild. And this mostly because the budget for these big AAA games continue to rise, while the amount of money that these big titles make is not increasing at the same pace. Spider-Man 2 now sold more than 10 million units, but we learned in the Insomniac leak that it needed 7.2 million copies to break even. So they only just started to make a profit, and the licensing fees are insane. Marvel takes 26% of the money made on every copy sold digitally, so that leaves Sony with way less profit than when they would sell God of War, for example. So I think that's why Santa Monica did not see any layoffs, as they are kind of the golden goose right now, with Sony getting 100% of every digital copy sold. Spider-Man and God of War are the biggest thing Sony has right now, but if they would sell the same amount of copies, Sony would get 26% more money from God of War, as they don't have to pay any licensing fees for that. And this also relates to a future news item about licensed games, because they might be on the way out, but more on that in a second. Like reducing the teams at some of these studios is probably an attempt at making their operations more profitable, but there's more going on. Basically the thing that Sony is doing now, so focusing only on consoles and releasing big AAA single player action adventure games, is not growing their business. And that's why, according to Herman Hulst, they need to focus on live service games as well as launching games on additional devices such as PC and mobile, but that requires a different approach and different resources. Again, the PlayStation 5 is doing well, but it's doing just as well as the PS4, while the cost to make these games is way higher. So Sony has to get money elsewhere. Releasing more big titles day one on PC is totally, I think, the easiest thing they can do in the short term, but we will see if they can reach an audience on mobile as well, or release more successful live service games. Of course, curious to hear your take in the comments. And speaking of PC, we got a pretty substantial rumor that we might finally learn more about a Ghost of Tsushima PC port this coming week, around March 5th. It has been a long time coming. I really hope it's true. I will of course keep you posted right here. Now there's sadly more bad news, but also some positive stuff. So let's go over that. Of course, a like on the video would really help me out, and subscribe, because I post one of these gaming news roundup videos every Sunday. Remember the first-person Mandalorian game that we discussed in a recent Sunday video that I will leave a link to in the video description? I got very hyped. Well, it has been cancelled after major layoffs, but this time at EA. They laid off 5% of their workforce, around 670 people. They shut down the Battlefield studio that was working on a single player game, with Criterion now taking over. And overall, EA says that they will move away from the development of future licensed IP that we do not believe will be successful in our changing industry, and that this greater focus allows us to drive creativity, accelerate innovation, and double down on our biggest opportunities, including our owned IP, sports, and massive online communities, to deliver the entertainment players want today and tomorrow. So basically, they're slowly moving away from working on games for licensed IP and will focus more on their own properties. Now, worth noting though is that the Iron Man game at the Motive Studio, the team behind the recent Dead Space remake, is still in the works. Just like the Black Panther game from a brand new studio EA is partnering with, from Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War developers. And they also confirmed Jedi 3. Not really a surprise, but yeah, it's happening, and it's also still in development. But it really seems that after these titles, EA is moving away from licensed games to focus on their own franchises instead, because investing in the things you own can of course in the end give you way more money, and it's something you control. They also of course dropped the FIFA name to work on EA Sports FC instead. And this really seems to be a trend. Ubisoft also already announced that the team working on Star Wars Outlaws, including the creative director, will work on Division 3 after this, instead of making another Star Wars game. Now, Ubisoft of course also did Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, that did not sell very well, so it seems that Ubisoft is also going back to focus on their own franchises. Square Enix of course already backed out after Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy flopped. It first seemed like a safe bet to make a game around a popular non-gaming franchise, but now it's far from a guarantee to hit. And then there's of course the fact that licensed games have to sell way more to make the same amount of profit compared to an IP you own. Again, Insomniac pays 26% to Marvel for every digital copy of Spider-Man 2 they sell. Now, Bethesda is still going to try it though, with Indiana Jones and Blade, of course from promising really great studios, Machine Games and Arcane Leon. But I'm curious if they will see way more success compared to making a Wolfenstein or Dishonored game to make the license fee make sense. What do you think about this new trend where licensed games are getting less popular for publishers? Drop it in the comments. And now let's go over some quick shots, news stories that I want to go over quickly. GTA 6 is in the final final stages of development. And this comes from Bloomberg, where Jason Schreier also reports that the workers have to return to the office 5 days a week instead of being able to work remote. Reason for this is to combat leaks, which has been a big issue with the game so far, of course, but it's also believed by some game companies that because of how complex game development is and how much of a collaborative effort, that working in the office works best for many. But yeah, it sucks of course for developers who design their lives around only having to go to the office a few days a week by, for example, moving further away from the studio, or like having kids, now they have to figure out daycare. Maybe they took the job because remote work was an option and now it's not possible anymore. So I'm wishing these developers the best in the final months or year and a half or something, because as some people say, oh, they're in the final stages of development, that must mean the game is coming out in early 2025. But no, the final stages for a game like this can still be very long, and we already discussed how the recent Take-Two investor call revealed that the game is likely coming out after April 2025, so really don't hold your breath. We do at least seem to have the new Dragon Age game in 2024, at least that is the plan right now. Jeff Grubb, who has been very reliable of course, says that the game is scheduled to release in late 2024 and that BioWare internally is confident on the release date. I mean, the action RPG was first planned for the end of last year, so they already had an extra year. We know the reveal is set for this summer. I really hope they make it this year, because we will need some extra big bangers next to Star Wars Outlaws and Assassin's Creed Red. Because I'm getting less confident in Borderlands 4 being 2024. Gearbox is of course owned by Embracer, but while they only just bought the company, they're now looking to sell it already, as they have of course been struggling big time after a $2 billion deal with the Saudi Wealth Fund fell through. So we will hear who takes Gearbox over soon, but in this Kotaku article it's also noted that Gearbox is now fully focused on just 2 games. A follow-up to Borderlands 3 underwent a reshuffling of some of its leadership team as Gearbox tries to get it across the finish line, while a sequel to Tiny Tina's Wonderlands underwent a soft reboot. So yeah, not surprising that those are the 2 games that are in development, and getting it across the finish line does sound like it might be launching soon. Sources are telling Kotaku that both projects are still very promising and progressing well, but that the upheaval contributed to feelings of uncertainty on the show floor. We've lost senior people because of this. And we already knew about veteran developers leaving Gearbox, which is never a good thing, but we will have to wait and see how this impacts Borderlands 4. But yeah, like, there's a lot going on behind the scenes at Gearbox. I'm not sure if they're then able to launch a game, although they probably have some sort of deal with 2K, who's publishing Borderlands, to maybe have it launched this year. So we will have to wait and see. The movie is of course coming out as well. I will keep you posted here. Let me know if you think it will still make this year in the comments down below. Now, fingers crossed that this coming week we'll not see any more layoffs. What we at least know for a fact is that the big Spider-Man 2 update is coming on March 7th with New Game Plus, the new suits, and way more. I will be streaming it and we will be covering the update of course, so stay tuned for that. Again, hopefully some Ghost of Tsushima PC news. That would be really awesome. Would love a good reason to return to that game and make new videos on it. And we will of course also be making more spoiler-free Final Fantasy VII Rebirth videos. I hope you're enjoying the game as much as I am, if you're playing right now. And if not, you totally should. Check out my spoiler-free review on why by clicking on the screen. Of course, a like on the video would really help me out. Subscribe, because of course at the end of the week I will have another gaming news roundup video for you. And I will speak to you very soon. Goodbye.